Do you remember Brittany Maynard? She was from California in 2014 and was diagnosed with an inoperable terminal tumor in her brain. She wanted to die with dignity. She didn't want to go to a hospice house. She didn't want to have somebody taking care of her, feeding her, or even wiping her butt. She wanted to be at home with her husband and her dogs. But California didn't allow that. So she moved to Oregon and became a resident where they would allow her to make an oral and written request to decide how she was going to die, decide her terms and her time, and when she had said her goodbyes. The Oncology Nursing Society reports with how Death with Dignity program works. It's legal in 3 states in the United States, Oregon, Washington, and Vermont, with Death with Dignity laws allowing mentally competent, terminally ill residents to voluntarily choose how they're going to die if they meet certain requirements. This is a more peaceful, humane way to deal with the fact that you've been diagnosed that no matter what happens, you are going to die. You get to say your goodbyes, tie up loose ends, and then take a pill and go to sleep. There's no suffering, there's no pain. This is important to some. And a lot of people feel that it's our right. We have choices. Working as a nurse, I work with a lot of hospice patients. And sometimes there's a lot of suffering that goes into dying. I recently worked with somebody who couldn't see. He couldn't walk. He was retaining fluids. And at the end, he couldn't swallow. He couldn't eat. And he was dying of thirst. And it didn't matter how much we gave him. He was hurting. Morphine every hour. Pain pills every 4 hours. Nothing worked. We turned him. His butt was turning into the effects of hamburger. But he still was living, and he didn't want to be. He begged us to kill him. He begged us to do something. But Iowa doesn't recognize the Death with Dignity laws. Until recently, Friday night, he finally passed away, and the suffering finally ended for him. So he was another case that would show that maybe we should be looking into these laws. Maybe we should be changing something. Is it right to make somebody suffer? We don't make our dogs suffer. We would euthanize them. Why wouldn't we do that to let our friends and family make that choice, that it's time? In 1994 was the first time that this law was passed in Oregon. And then it came up for reballot in 97. And the voters again agreed in Oregon that this should be a law, that it is passed. Then in 2008, Washington followed suit and made it legal. In 2013, Vermont then made it legal. And right at the moment, Montana and California are working on legislation that allows for the Death with Dignity laws. Now, to follow and qualify under these laws, there are many things that must happen. First, you have to have a terminal illness that shows that you are going to die within 6 months. You must be a competent adult that is legal to sign their own name. You can't be under any pain meds. You cannot be under any sort of sedative, anxiety med. You need to be completely medication-free and of sound mind to make the choice that you are going to die with dignity. Then you need to ask in an oral way through a nurse or a doctor that you would like to invoke your death with dignity. After you have asked orally, you then need to submit a written request to your doctor, who then will walk you through the process of invoking your right to die with dignity. After you have invoked this right, you then are walked through your other options to show you that it's not your only option. You do have pain meds, you have hospice, there are palliative care options. But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it's only going to get you out of some pain, and you're still going to suffer. And that's not okay for some. Now, some people believe that by allowing the death with dignity law, that everyone's going to choose this. So there's been some studies to show that that's just not true. They did a study in Washington to show that in the first 6 months after the death with dignity law was completed, 114 people asked about the death with dignity law. Of the 114 people, only 30 people actually received secobarbital to actually end their life with dignity. In the time since then, there's only been 255 people who have actually asked for this since 2014. And of the 255 people, 40 people received the prescription for secobarbital. Of the 40 people who even received the prescription, only 24 have actually taken the med and ended their life. That's a very small amount. So it works for some people, but not for everybody. And that's important to remember, that you're giving people an option. They don't have to take it, but if you don't want to suffer and you know that's coming, you do have options. Since then, they've kept track with the Oregon Public Health Department on how many people have actually asked about the med and how many have actually taken the med. It started off in 1998, was the first year they kept track. 24 people asked for it, 16 people took it. The next year in 1999, 33 people asked, 27 took it. Now we've come, and most people are aware of the death with dignity laws. Plus we have a lot more cancers and things that are terminal. So in the year 2015, 218 people asked about the law, but only 132 actually took this med. That's not very many people when you consider how many people live in Oregon. Another campaign that they've showed to show how few people are actually invoking it, but that it's still an important rule and law, is that of people terminally ill, only 1 in 50 people terminally ill are invoking their right. But it's still important to keep that as a rule and a law, because for them it was the right decision. Not everybody suffers when dying, but if you're going to suffer and you know that you are going to suffer, you need to have options on how to make that better. Of them, 90% of the patients who have an assisted death in Oregon are also enrolled in hospice. This is also an important part, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Another perspective written by Deb Christensen, who does work for hospice, stated, "We planned for an outdoor wedding, but we put up a tent just in case." It's the same idea with hospice. Hospice provides routine care, symptom management, and for families that are taking care of their dying family, they offer a respite service so that they can rest and be ready to take care of their family again. They also offer on-call services to hospice staff. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, if something happens and somebody's gasping for air or they're starting to die, you have somebody to call. Now, I think the most important part of hospice is the bereavement staff. If somebody is terminally ill, their pain and suffering is going to end, but the family's isn't. So when you have passed, they are there indefinitely to help that family move through the process of grieving and how to plan the funeral and how to be okay with it so that nothing happens to the family. Now, an important part to remember about hospice is that they don't include some things, like room and board. So maybe you don't know when you're going to die, but it could be 6 months from now. You're going to be having to pay room and board between now and then. Maybe that's a lot for your family. That's another reason that somebody might choose to die with dignity. They're not going to leave their family with a financial burden. It also doesn't include if you have to keep going to the hospital. Hospitals are expensive. And if you could prevent that, even for one time, you could save your family thousands. So what do we do? But what if there was a way was more to hospice? So they can't help everyone get out of pain. So that's why it's important to keep remembering, to keep fighting for the death with dignity laws.